Down to other matters. Anybody else have anything new to bring up?
I wanted, Mr. Mayor, I did, were these on or do I need this on? Or was my mouth big enough?
It's on.
I think your mouth is big enough. Don't start. She asked. Under other matters, Councilman Edwards and I had an opportunity to visit with Building and Zoning. It was an extremely productive meeting. Gary Mitchell, Dexter Monroe, and Teresa Davis were all three there. Very reserved at first. Candidly worried about why or where we're visiting. Candidly worried about Whitestone. We tried to reassure them that we want the lines of communication open. And therefore, since I didn't get to talk to you about it yesterday, as I had promised them, I stopped by there this morning to tell them that the council was not leaving them out to dry, but we didn't have time. I told them we probably wouldn't have time today, so thank you, Mayor, for this time. I think we need, this is my personal opinion and Councilman Edwards' opinion, although I'm not speaking for him. We need to have a budget amendment and put Dexter Monroe on full-time immediately. My personal advice to him would be, if he needs to be 40 hours a week to have income for his family, then he either needs to pursue full-time at Colonial Beach or pursue other full-time interests. The man can't survive on part-time work. He obviously had some other business going at one time. I'm not familiar with that, but that is now not done. He is working more than his allotted time for the town. He is appears to be a very dedicated individual, knows what he's talking about. At least Tommy and I both thought so. He is not certified, as I said yesterday, to do the erosion and sediment control. There are 3 thick volumes that you have to be very knowledgeable about. He only has 11 volumes of codes that he has to be familiar with. So he is not the one, by his own admission, to be the erosion and settlement person. He does drive his own vehicle. I understand from him he does not get mileage, but I have since found out he does receive gasoline.
That is correct.
Does he get money for gas or go to the town pump?
He goes to the town pump, so we monitor and we know how much he uses.
Okay, I did not know that. That's where we are on Dexter.
I'm sorry.
Ms. Goldberg said she couldn't hear my big mouth.
Well, I don't know that.
You're sorry.
And you may not be coming across on the video. So.
We have Teresa Davis in place in that office. Our personal recommendation to the council is put code enforcement in Teresa's title. I think she's, I don't know what it is, whatever her title is now. Add code enforcement to it. She is another good employee, I feel. I don't know, just from this initial meeting, I have had contact with that office before and since. That's what was suggested would make her have the ability to be a little more proactive, not with the weeds and not with minor things, but a house that's owned by someone that lives here in town on Jackson Street that has no windows, no door, and there's dishes sitting on the front step that the homeowner refuses to put up the $1,500 bond on. That house needs to be raised. There's no saving it. There's a lot of inoperable vehicles around town. Ms. Davis has been told by the previous council that she's not to worry about them unless she gets a complaint. I don't want to wait till we get a complaint. I want to make sure that we're doing what we have the ability to do now, ahead of time. I'd like to know why. I'm not sure how to ask this question, but why was our attorney bypassed by the BCA on the Beachgate matter. Okay. Why, were you involved in the Beachgate matter from the very beginning?
Yes.
Yes, but the BZA is a separate entity from the town. I don't represent the BZA.
So you don't have any contact with them?
No, and in fact, it's possible that if the council disagrees with something that the BZA does, that the town would actually file an appeal of the BZA's decision.
Okay, well,
That's
that's
why.
why I'm still learning. I had
Yeah.
to ask. Okay, and the last but not least, our last fee schedule for this community development portion was made in 2006. Those fees could be increased, whether it's done with a budget amendment or in our budget. I don't have the wherewithal to go for that, but I wanted to bring that to the council's attention. They need to be addressed, and that could be another revenue source. I was asked why our fees are in our code when they should be in ordinances. I don't know the answer to that question, and I'd like to get back to the person that asked me that. Our fees are in our town code.
And they get there by being adopted as an ordinance.
So, I was
I'm not
asked
sure what.
why they're part of the town code and not just an ordinance.
Like a separate fee schedule as a separate?
Exactly.
Is that what you're talking
Yeah.
about?
You can do it either way. With everything being online, a lot of localities do have it as part of their code.
Mhm. Okay, and I was asking, I didn't have the answer, and just like Wanda said last night, if we don't know the answer, I didn't want to just pull something out of the hat, but I said I would bring it and ask him.
Is that correct? I mean, she was told that, but is it correct?
That the fees are in the town code, yes.
Correct.
And which is an ordinance that the town council has adopted and made it a part of the code. I think what I'm hearing, and I may not, I'm not sure, you help me out, maybe there's someone's suggesting that there's a separate fee schedule that's looked at each year and adopted as a part of the budget.
Exactly.
Maybe.
I didn't project that, because I'm not sure what I'm dealing with here.
Yeah, I'm not
Maybe.
sure, I'm guessing. I don't
And that's
have any
probably
question.
it.
If it's a fee, it has to be adopted by the council. And it can either just be in an uncodified ordinance, or it can be codified, either way.
Okay.
But it has to be done
Adopted.
pursuant to an ordinance.
Okay, and last but not least, I know I said the other one was last. The feeling from that office collectively is that we need to revise the code. Ours is extremely out of date. And once again, I don't have the wherewithal to speak to that, I don't know, I'm just reporting back. And if we were looking for another revenue source, which I assume we always are, might we want to look at rental inspections for residential properties? I know that's a tough subject to address, we don't do it now. Assuming that not everyone in the town is the slumlord, but there are some, and it was said to me, well, you know, if people are unhappy with where they live, move or address their landlord. If a person is in a position to have to rent an inexpensive piece of property, they're going to be, number one, afraid to address the landlord for eviction fears, and number two, they're not going to be able to move anywhere else. I would like to see rental inspections, but I think we'd have to revise our code to do that. And that would definitely be another revenue source.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question of Ms. Brubaker? You said the associates or employees there told you that we need to change the code. Were they referring to the town code in general, or were there specific areas that they wanted us to focus on? Do you know?
You know, I'd have to go back to them,
Okay,
Ms.
all right.
Holmes. The meeting was so relaxed. The notes that I took, I went back to read. I couldn't even share those notes with you. They're horrendous.
That's okay.
we were just focusing on opening up the lines of communication, and these things that I brought up were a byproduct of that communication. One other last thing is the fact that the fire department is not notified when there's a fire in town, and that's a biggie. Or a car into a building. You heard Chief say last night, well, it's kind of up to the homeowner. Well, it is up to the homeowner ultimately, but if the homeowner's out of town, the fire department probably needs to be made aware, or Dexter, or Teresa. Somehow we've got to open up those lines of communication so community development can get out there and do their job.
But the reason why, it's very simple. Dexter works a 20-hour work week. When the fire service gets something like that, it's got to go to a full-time building official, so they're going to automatically call the person in Westmoreland County, because they know he's on duty 24/7, whether it's Paul Bronco or if it's somebody else. But that's where I'm hoping that we'll be able to get Dexter on board, and then when a call comes out in the city and there's a car into a building or something, the fire department's going to know to call dispatch to call our building official, and I think that's what it amounts to. It's going to Westmoreland County.
Right.
Can I address some of the issues? To me, there are a lot of different levels of entry where you would get somebody involved with doing an inspection. Being involved with real estate in a number of counties throughout Virginia and in other states, if there's a fire, to what extent is that fire? Is it a frying pan fire with smoke damage? Does the fire department get involved in every situation? And it is the fire department's responsibility to report something? Yeah, to a certain degree, yes. But it's the homeowner who is responsible, or the landlord is responsible. And this is covered by a number of different laws throughout the state of Virginia. Landlord-Tenant Act, one of the specific, covers tenants who rent that they have to file a complaint. That's the avenue they would go through. I'm not against having more regulation and more revenue sources, but if you want to address the overall situation of safety, at what level do you do that? Do you inspect every single home in the town, every single business, every single building? A lot of these buildings, regardless of what their intended use is, business, homes, rentals, beach rentals, they've all been inspected at some point. They've been given CO, certificate of occupancies. They are regulated to a high degree by their own insurance companies owning certain properties. My insurance company wants valid proof that I have the right amount of fire extinguishers, the number of smoke detectors, that the dwelling is safe, or they're not going to insure it.
Well, Councilman, I think there's two separate issues here.
Sure.
One is, I doubt very seriously some of these slumlords that don't have mortgages have insurance. I know for a fact there is a 4-unit apartment project within walking distance of here that did not have smoke detectors. Mold is not an issue for the town, but the floors are going like this. It probably hasn't been inspected since 1950. The other issue with the fire department, maybe I didn't state that right. The fire department, I feel, does have an obligation. If there's a fire, of course not a frying pan fire, but if there's a fire with structural damage to the home, our building inspectors need to know about that. Homeowner lives up in Alexandria, doesn't come down for 2 weekends, 911 doesn't have an address, a phone number, so what do? Just let that building sit there? Without our building inspector, I don't know that our volunteer fire department turns the electric off, shuts off running water. I don't know that, and I probably need to learn that.
Right. The only thing that I'm looking at is if the town were to respond to any individual, they have to have what I would feel a reasonable cause to do that. What's the reasonable cause? The neighbor doesn't like them, the tenant doesn't like them, Somebody down the block doesn't like them, or we just look at it, it looks like it's appeared to be run down. If there's an issue, a genuine issue, structural-wise, where the tenant is in a building and the landlord or the homeowner, for that matter, is doing construction on the home and there's no visible permit, that's a reason to enter. It's a reason to check it out. Other than that, every single person who buys a home is not responsible or even obligated to say to any town or entity, come and inspect this building. You buy it as is, it's grandfathered under the law. It's up to you when you do work to get a permit, and the conditions of that permit are to get an inspection at different phases. It's electrical, insulation, structural, plumbing, heating and air, that type of thing. It is the obligation of the homeowner or the building owner to take that.
So you're addressing the rental inspection issue?
Yeah.
And I respect that. But the fire issue is a separate issue.
Well, the fire issue is at what point, a house could burn down completely. It's an obvious situation where you have to go in and rebuild it. But if a kitchen fire is smoke damage, that's not something where you have a real genuine need for a inspector to come in. Now, you could say, well, there wasn't a smoke detector, or there wasn't the proper exhaust fan or something. Well, maybe someone just wasn't paying attention. There's just a lot of degrees of what level. If you have a fire because something shorts out in the house, and a good portion of that building gets destroyed, yeah, you have to have some kind of inspection. Even storm damage with water. People who have had their homes flooded, are they going to have certain inspections taking place? I can guarantee you not all of them are going to do that. A lot of them are going to try to get by. The electrical systems are going to fail. They're going to short out with salt water. There's no real requirement. Go up in New York and New Jersey, in the areas that were hit with Sandy. It's an overwhelming task.
Well, I can appreciate that, and we could certainly...
Could I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
I think the fire department needs to answer some of these questions. I've seen fires that have a lot of damage on homes, and they're always roped off. I assume the fire department does that.
They might put up a little paper tape, but the fire department now, as I was told, Tommy was told, contacts the Westmoreland County building inspector. He deems what is necessary for follow through. I'm just saying, if they can call Westmoreland County, they can call our building inspector. Why? That's once again.
I would think that if the fire was severe enough, I personally think it would be okay to call Westmoreland County.
Well,
Because if they're going to address it, then it's addressed.
but does Westmoreland County address a fire issue in the town of Colonial Beach when we're paying an inspector to do that very job?
I would hope that the first person available would address it.
Well, I look at it differently.
Well, he's part-time. You have to understand, I was in the fire service for 30 years. I understand what they do. Now, I don't know how well they're trained here, and I know Chief Roby is the main fireman over Dogwood. And I know when we had a fire, we had fire marshals readily available in the city, so did Fairfax County Army. But small places like this, no, they don't. So they have to, I guess the fire department's got to be trained to use their discretion. And I know it's automatically done that they're going to call it Westmoreland County until we get a full-time building official. That's immaterial. But if there's a fire, it's up to the official or the fire marshal to say whether it's inhabitable or not. It's not up to you as a homeowner, Harry homeowner, anybody else. If they come in and say you have to get out of your house, just like we did up the beach gate, they placard that building. And they placard that house, and you're not going in there, or you will be arrested. Very simple. That's the way it is. But It just goes back to we need a full-time official.
Well, I think
To
what
me.
happened with Beachgate is actually the fire marshal was the one that aimed it.
Well, that's a
Yeah.
state
Then
fire
the-
marshal.
And granted, our inspector supported some of those ideas, but he did not have the final say. And it was the fire marshals that had the final say.
Right, once you bring him in.
It's the same thing when you, if you have a
They told
home.
us, the fire marshal told us he would
Yeah,
not do it. He said, your building official can condemn the building.
That's what I thought.
He said, I'm not doing it.
I was gonna,
He said, you have the building inspector, he had jurisdiction.
So Dexter actually,
Yes.
Yeah.
yes.
okay,
I remember that
But
being
he didn't
said.
undertake it as a fire marshal position, he took it as the building inspector to the structural damage.
And
And in this case, the fire and rescue, they notified somebody because Dexter was there almost immediately when they figured out it was building damage.
Mr. Mayor, may I speak to that for a moment? I know that I have received telephone calls at home late at night, either looking for Dexter from the fire department under Fire Chief Jet. He had me on speed dial. So, with Chief Roby, while we have a great relationship, we've not specifically addressed this. And if you will allow me the opportunity, I will get Chief Roby together with Dexter.
And I saw that email, and when Chief Roby comes to speak, I think I agree with Wanda. These are questions we can ask him. But this is also a concern that Tommy and I wanted to address to the council, so we could be digesting this. I know, like I say, everybody has their opinion about rental inspections and whatever, so we can think about it.
Yeah, but I do know that Dexter's been called late at night or.
Yeah.
Just one other thing. Jim and I also went for an inspection. We were there 4.5 hours at Public Works. They had some desires and need some people too. But I can't recommend at this point making anyone full-time, giving anyone a raise or anything else. You know, we're going to have some budget issues. And just because we have a good employee, and I absolutely agree that he's a good employee, but I don't think we can say, I want him to be made full-time immediately. There are things that have to be researched. We have to research his backlog. We have to research if there's a need. And then we have to find the money. You know, we don't just make a budget amendment. We have to have the money there to support it. You know, we're not the U.S. government where we can print our own or get it from China. So,
No, you just give them a job and then chop their salary 20%.
right.
That's cool.
And I think it's a knee-jerk reaction, I'm sorry, but I think it's a knee-jerk reaction right now, and we have a management study coming up. I think we will get this kind of information. And I also think before we make a recommendation, we need to do our research. We need to find out what the fire department does. We need to find out what inspections Dexter's doing, if there's a backlog, which ones there are. We need to find out his response time, because for building inspections, there is a requirement for inspections. Some jurisdictions it's 24 hours, I don't know what it is.
I believe it's 48 hours.
And that's probably
Yeah.
Boca code, right?
Yes, and he makes the response time sometimes.
Within 48 hours.
Unfortunately, they are on a Sunday or on a Saturday or something.
Because if he doesn't make it within the required amount of time, the builder is allowed, I believe I'm correct, to go ahead and cover up what he came to inspect if he doesn't come within the prescribed amount of time. So all of this, did they mention that to you?
Mm-hmm.
All of this is important, and we need to research it.
Well,
we need to do it possibly
no.
as a group.
On the surface, I think Tommy and I did research that. I found out what his backlog was, and I've talked to each of you a little bit about this individually.
It's 25 inspections that's never been closed.
So that's a revenue source.
Yes, it
Whether
is.
or not it's needed or not is not an issue. He doesn't have time to get to these. He's working I don't know, is it 20 or 28 hours he
It
works?
could be 3 8-hour days,
Okay,
24 hours.
he's here in this town every single day. He's working, I don't want to say off the clock. He's donating time back. In other words, he's working much more than his 3 8-hour days. If we can't get a budget amendment, I think it's my responsibility to share with my fellow council members, we're going to lose Dexter because the man has to put food on the table. And if that's the way we as a group see it, then I respect that.
Yeah,
But
that's-
I
that's
wanted
all
to
we
bring
wanted to
it
bring out.
to your
I'm afraid
attention.
we're gonna lose it.
And have somebody say to me later, well, why didn't you mention it?
Well, one thing I'm hearing from you guys, that a lot of this is an outgrowth of what happened at Beachgate. That got a lot of people coming to me, and I'm sure some of you being like, how could a commercial structure in an incorporated town get that bad? And pretty much, if it hadn't been for that car running to the side of the building, we can only speculate how much longer those conditions would have stayed that way. And with the other businesses and the hotels and motels in town saying, they're like, we were never going to allow to get that bad. So from where I'm sitting, the thing that, and I kind of think where your head towards is making sure that if there was a process to catch something like that, it obviously didn't work. If there isn't a process to prevent something like that from happening again, we need to develop it. And that's priority number one for me, because I don't think it's as conservative as I am with regards to personal property rights and as fierce a protector of them as I am. When you're talking about, you've got property that's designed for private use, and then you got business property, which is supposed to be designed for public access. And they're kind of falling into two different realms. And I'm a little concerned that we don't overstep with regards to private residences. But somebody contacted me by email just this week. And they find themselves, and they rented a property, they're in it, they've since realized that the building's a mess, the house is a mess, and they're at a loss for what kind of redress they have. It never occurred to them that the tenant could be permitted to rent a place that is in such obvious disrepair and there be no recourse. So, so it's worth exploring something that we could do. And I know twice now in my life when I've acquired houses, one of the things the bank required me to do was hire a home inspector. It's actually a very thriving industry. And it could be built in, pretty much you just call them up, they come in, they're credentialed, it's built into the contract, and it's, that's just how it is. I mean, there are ways of doing this without, hobbling the property owners any more than they should be, but fixing some of the rat traps we got around this town, to put it bluntly.
Well, it goes to our revitalization. We want to ride through town, and we want to make it look economically sound to economic development. We want it to be safe. We want a revenue source. I'm not saying this has to be taken care of today.
Right.
I've shared it with the other members of this council. So now, if the burden is not just on my conscience, I think it should be, instead of our goal planning, a part of a strategic plan to address these and the many other issues we're going to come across in these meetings. When Tommy and I go to Public Works, I'm sure we're going to have the same type.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm passionate about when someone tells me or shows me something that's amiss, sharing it with you guys. And that's all I got to say about that.
I'd like to answer one thing for Mr. Curtin here. Those renters that have a problem after they moved in, there is something in place. It's state.
Right.
You go to the Tenant Landlord Act, and the tenants have a responsibility to report it. And if I understand it correctly, our people are allowed to go in once they have a complaint. But under the Tenant Landlord Act, I also am a landlord, so I'm familiar with it. It will be addressed. I don't see where we need to write more code when we already have the laws written by the state. So let's just, why reinvent? We'll use that.
And I agree. That's,
The only thing that, tenants are very hesitant to do that.
mm-hmm.
But it's on their shoulders. If they care enough, the government cannot regulate everything. People have a responsibility themselves. So if they have a home that doesn't meet sanitary regulations, safety regulations, then they need to report it. And at that point, when it's reported, There's other, that, you know, they can take it to court, and
Right.
then our inspectors can go in. If it's that bad, it's condemned. So there are ordinances, regulations, and laws in place. I don't think we need to overregulate.
Well, I agree, and in fact, in response to that, that's pretty much what I instructed this resident to do.
I was going to say, we need to
But
educate
I sent them the
them
links
if they
to
call us.
where they could go, and you're talking about a typical person who, they moved here from a more urban environment where they were used to a higher level of access, governmental oversight, regulation. They come down here, it never occurred to them that there would be that much, potentially that wouldn't be in place anywhere. And I had to tell them, look, you know, this is what you got to do, and pretty much send them links to the state agencies they have to report it to. And they told me they were going to let me know and keep me posted.
You know, and it doesn't cost them much, really and truly, to go to court. But almost every lease has a clause in it that if something is not safe, it's unsanitary, whatever, they can get their deposit back, and they won't have to pay rent. In fact, there's things in place where you pay your rent until it's mediated to the court.
Right.
And the court, the judge holds the
And I told them
rent.
that it was likely that they had that recourse that way.
Exactly.
And but it was going to be up to them to start the process. And, it was a retiree that rent a house up on the
The
corner.
problem you get into, and the beach gate was a great example. You got people, that's what they can afford.
Right.
But they, you know, if they could have it a lot better, it would cost more.
Then they couldn't afford it.
One reason, they're not gonna turn the landlord in or anything. Once the issue with the beach gate was solved and everybody got moved out, at least 2 or 3 of them were picked up on outstanding warrants. One was a fugitive from Maryland.
Yep.
They're not about to go out there and stir up something and go to court and say, I want to sue my landlord, and the court says, well, you're a fugitive from Maryland, we're gonna get you somewhere nice to live. You got bars on it.
Yeah.
I have to say one thing. I agree the concern level should be raised, and we should look into it. At the same regard, we have to also recognize that there are other things in place. You know, housing is not overlooked by any means by anybody. You have a number of entities that take care of it. The state goes through the Landlord Tenant Act, building codes, and inspections, and certificates of occupancies. When banks finance a property, they require insurance. Insurance companies require documentation and inspections. They come down to the properties, okay? Almost every property I've ever owned, I've had insurance companies come down to check the property out.
But there again, Councilman, we can talk about this all day. I think we should move on, Mayor, but I just want to say, these people don't have mortgages on these people, on these homes, or rental properties. They've been owned by great granny whatever since 1921, and they've continuously been rented. They haven't applied for a permit, they haven't broken the law visibly, so they're just being rented, being rented, being rented.
That's fine, but how do you, I don't feel the government entity at any level has the right to impose upon a citizen a certain standard that they expect them to achieve that has changed over the course of time. A number of houses that are in historical districts have many things that would be, under today's standards, out of code, but they're kind of captured under the historical society that they're allowed to continue and operate that way. If you purchase a house and you do work on your house, you have to go by today's standards. You're not required in the process to go back and redo everything that didn't meet the codes of today.
I didn't mean that. What I meant was, it has to be a safe environment,
Sure.
and it is government's job to provide safe housing for low income at whatever level. It is our job to be socially responsible. I disagree with you on that. And like I said, Mr. Mayor, we can talk about this forever, but it needs to be in our planning, and we need to address it.
Well, I agree with you.
You got the floor, Mr. Edwards.
Tim, I want to talk to you about something, I want
Okay.
to address something to the county attorney.
All right.
We have a property maintenance, and you should need to go look at the book down there at their office. It's supposed to be enforced in this town. We need to reiterate to Teresa, she needs to get out there and be proactive, but I understand we're tying her hands. She only goes out if it's a complaint. But she needs to do like you say. She needs to get out there and go to the new Days Inn or whatever the name of it is now, and be proactive with any business that's here, whether it be a restaurant or whatever. She should be allowed to go in at least once a year and do an inspection. That's a positive thing. We're also helping that person so it won't catch on fire, you know, by being positive and by also working with that property maintenance code. She can go out and when she sees things out on the street, like a broken window or something like that, she goes up and just tells the folks, you know, hey, you got a window, you know, under this code, you need to have it fixed. I'm gonna give you 2 weeks, month, whatever, to get it done.
Right.
That's gonna make us look better. That'll make the town look better.
And that's
But
what I
it's
mean.
letting her to do her job. Let her do her job.
Right, when that examined, in fact, on a sidebar discussion I had with you, when I heard those words, I'm like, you know, what now? I mean, to hear that, when this poor lady has been accused of being anything but restrained by so many people in this town, to have that said, it was just a shock to me to hear that. And yeah, and because there's a lot that how that place could get like that, and it's raised a lot of eyebrows. And a good fix would be simply empowering her to do her job.
And that's not gonna cost us any money.
Right.
That's just gonna cost action on this council's behalf. I was told straight-faced this morning that the previous council, and I'm not faulting them, and that the previous council instructed her not to be proactive.
Absolutely
She
not.
has to wait. Well, an individual on this council, I was told did, Mr. Mayor, and I don't want to argue with you, but,
Council as a body did not instruct
okay,
anyone to stop.
and that's what exactly I told
We went
her.
through a period where we were getting complaints that if somebody had a car that they were working on, it wasn't tagged, that she would come up and there's always an altercation. And some of the people in this town don't like government people coming to their property. And they would tell them, Teresa would tell them, you know, by law, you've got 30 days to move that car or whatever, or we'll have it towed away from here.
Or get it
Well,
repaired.
there's two
And they're on
sides
the
to every
defensive
story.
saying, you can't come on my property and take my car. We had talked about this 6 months ago as the council started changing. We've got a code of ordinances this thick. And, you know, it says you can't have one car on your property that doesn't have a tag on it. Unless you build a fence around it, put it in a garage, hide it from view.
That's true.
You know, some of these ordinances, we overstepped our bounds because we were taking a sledgehammer to a pebble. If somebody's got 20 cars all broken down sitting in their front yard, yeah, that needs to be addressed. If somebody's got a Mercedes-Benz SL sitting there, just because they haven't put a tag on it because they need to do some work to it, it looks beautiful. You know, we need to look at things realistically.
Well, I disagree. I think if the code or ordinance or resolution or whatever is in place, then we need to change it or let
That's
this
what we talked
employee
about,
do their
going through a
job.
lot of them, and we just
Okay,
haven't
so
done it yet.
if we could put it on the burner for another day, I'm sorry I took so much time.
Yes.
Okay, Andrew, before I address you, I want to tell everybody here. God, now I'm losing my thought. I wanted to ask Adriana, let's talk about the property on Jackson Street without the windows and everything.
Okay.
And we know it's Mrs. Gunderson's property, okay? This has been stalled long enough, and with y'all's help, and you will agree with me, that I would like for the town attorney to address a polite letter stating that she has so much time to take it down and come in and talk to Gary Mitchell and get the $1,500, and she'll get this back. All she's got to do is get the property, take it down to the ground, plant grass seed, if grass seed grows, she'll get her $1,500 back. That was explained to me by Gary Mitchell. If you want to dispute it, talk to Gary Mitchell. But she needs to come forward with this, but we need to tell this lady here to come forward with the letter and give her a certain amount of time. Then after that, she has to take her to court. The town has to take her to court. This has been stalled long enough. The gentleman next door that has the 3 vacant lots, Hamlet Homes, he will not build until that is taken down. Now, we're stopping a gentleman, and that comes from the zoning administrator's office. He will not build. Now, we're not gonna let 3 new houses come up because we got a certain house that needs to be taken down. I'm just asking you for your support to ask her to send a polite letter, giving her X amount of time to get the house down. If not, we're gonna proceed court proceedings, whatever we have to do. Are you in agreement with this?
Well, I remember when all this kind of bubbled up last year, and there eventually, I remember seeing there's a fairly substantial email, and I thought that that is essentially what she had already agreed to do.
Yes, property owner agreed to take it down. I understand from the fire department as well that she asked them to raise
Yeah.
the property. She needed erosion and sediment bond for, clearing the property and reseeding it and leaving it in a certain condition.
Right.
And I think that's where we are.
So she just never put up a bond.
That is correct.
So, okay.
And
That's
this
the-
So she
council,
just essentially needs to be reminded of the informal agreement that was reached, what, 10 months ago, something like that?
why don't we have that in some kind of a tickler, that it's not automatically brought back, that this house is just sitting there,
Right.
this safety hazard. If I go in that house and break my leg,
Right.
it's a safety hazard. Why, if we've already addressed this once, does it have to come back to this
Right.
body? We should have already put in place.
So it
To
sounds
have
like
our
it's
town
just
attorney
what's been
write
already
this
reached
lady a letter.
informally into writing and tell her, okay, it's time
That's
to
what
do
I'm
this.
saying. We need to let our attorney
Yeah.
do this.
Because I thought this was done.
Well, that's just it. It's
Can
been
we direct her
stalled.
now?
Okay.
Okay, wait, I think somewhere we're getting mixed up with some how we're supposed to deal with this here. Planning and zoning and town management are supposed to take care of these issues. It's in place, there's certain things that have been delayed for whatever reason, and I'm sure that Gary has a way to address this, does he not?
Yes, he does.
So I think it's just a
Yeah,
matter
so
of...
that's
That's what
brought
he
it to
said.
our
That's what he
attention.
brought it to our attention.
But
The
I'm
next
not-
step is to go to her. That's
Right.
what he said.
So
That's
he's,
what he said.
To go to the attorney?
Yes.
So
He
he's
For
asked
not-
her to address a letter in a very nice way. Not to be nasty to her. Ask her, give her time.
Right.
so
But
is,
if not, after a certain date, we're going to proceed with a court hearing.
has Gary attempted an official correspondence with her?
I don't know.
Correspondence already been done. She's agreed to the house to be razed, but she's never come forward with
She
it.
won't get the bond, is what Gary told Tommy
All
and
right.
I.
I'm asking is that, it just, because,
If,
it's just make sure that all our i's and t's are dotted and crossed, is that, so we don't get hit back, I didn't realize, da.
Well, if she gets a nice letter from the town attorney, I don't think that leaves us culpability. I think that ensures that we're doing our job.
Oh, I've got no problem with the letter, I just want to make sure that.
I think
it's
what
all
he's
done right.
asking though, in Gary's position, has he sent a nice polite reminder letter? And has there been any response? If he did, and then the landlord has done nothing about it, then I think it's proper to give it to the attorney. But, as a department head, I think that would have been the step. I would have thought that probably they would have had a tickler file to follow up.
Well, and that needs to be addressed with them. As a department head, I would hope that he certainly did address it with the letter, but I don't know.
What I'm going to point out is that Gary doesn't need our permission to go to the town attorney to exercise the procedure.
Well,
It's
after
something
we have,
that Gary should do.
after we have Whitestone in place, maybe that'll solve that issue. I'm telling you right now, Gary asked us,
Right.
he doesn't feel he has the ability to communicate with the town attorney.
I will be very candid. In many cases in the past, depending on who the citizen is, we would get pushback from individual council members on certain issues. It just depended on the connection. There are certain times you feel the heat, and I can speak to that personally, depending on who the individual is when they're trying to perform the functions of their job. And so if the town council will support us, if we dot all our i's and cross all our t's, we can do a great job. It's the individual pushback, and I'm embarrassed to say it, but that is.
Well, I would like the council to step back and allow the town to do what they're supposed to do. And if Gary has a procedure in place, he should be able to.
Gary does contact.
Right, so that should be something, a standard thing, and we can absolutely make up all the observations to make sure this happens, but I don't think our involvement is actually necessary. I just think it's a matter
So
of
we should
bringing it
direct
to
this
the
to the town manager,
Right.
to direct it to Gary, to
Right.
send out a nice reminder and
or-
give her,
Yeah.
what, 2 months?
I think we should bring it to the attention of the town manager, who will then task her force, people that work with her, to do what's appropriate, and if it involves the town attorney, that's great. We are aware of it, the town manager is now aware of it, we should just say, okay, we're done. We have other things to do. Not to undermine, I'm not really trying to undermine this, I just think there are other things to do.
But we
And
all have got
But this
to
was one of
agree.
the things that's been on our plate for a long time.
Right.
That's-
As the town
Can
manager
we
just said,
agree to allow the town manager to take care of it and see where it goes?
we have to understand that when this landowner comes and starts attacking us, why are you letting this happen? We've got to stand our ground and say,
Exactly.
we're aware of it going on and we support it.
Correct.
And there are,
Because there was too many times I've seen it happen just in
Yes,
the
sir. Yes,
a
sir.
little over 2 years I've been on the council. That when a citizen goes to a certain council member or somebody, they'll find their friend. And it's like, don't stop this right now.
Absolutely.
and that's what's happened in this case. I'm not gonna call the council member by name, but I am gonna go on the record that there is a person on this council that has stopped that from happening.
I think I can say that that's not going to happen anymore. I think we're all behind. Everyone should be treated consistently. If I'm speeding, I'll probably get a ticket. It makes no difference who you are. You have to abide by the laws.
Absolutely.
However, I think, I would have thought that there had already been contact. I thought we had a reputation already for being a new council, that we weren't going to tolerate this. So, well, I don't know why all the employees are so
That's one of
timid.
the things I was going to speak to later, and I neglected to put us out there, but yes. I
This is a new day, and Gary can send his letter.
Yeah. And it probably wouldn't hurt to, and I'm just on sidebar, to have him CC Andre on it, so that way if there is no response, you got all you need to, you're gonna need to take it to the next step. And,
And could we make sure the letter is certified, so the person has to sign for it?
Actually, the certified letters usually don't get picked up.
That's right.
Mr. Mayor, if you would indulge me on this, could we move on? I'm not being rude, but I really didn't want to continue this till today, and obviously, some of the people that we wanted here aren't here, so if we could go back to another
The one
issue.
that ain't here.
I'd appreciate it. Well, I'm upset by that. We said that we would also discuss under new business is the police building. And you said that last night.
That's correct.
I'm interested in what you have to say about that.
I shared with you one page from the minutes of the last committee, work session, and the mayor recommended that once we got an appraisal, that we would advertise, have a public hearing, and you may not have used the word advertise, I'm putting words in your mouth, have a public hearing and see what we got in terms of interest, and then proceed to negotiate, something to that effect. I highlighted it from the minutes for you, Mayor. And my question last night was, does the council want us to set a public hearing date and describing in the ad what that is, or public input?
I think what we should do at this
To
point,
get input on what should be done with the business. with the
we
building.
had an offer to buy the building that was significantly less than the appraisal came in. And I think it would behoove us to get back with the group that offered to buy it, share the appraisal with them, and say, do y'all want to continue, have a public hearing? We're not gonna sell it to you for what you're offering to buy it for. You know, if you wanna make a new offer, or we could advertise it for sale, whatever the council would decide to do, but we need to get back to them before we just have a public hearing and have them come in and say, well, are we gonna get it? And we say, no way in the world you're gonna get it for that.
Mr. Mayor, may I update you? I did share the dollar amount with the, after I shared it with you, I shared the dollar amount with the gentleman and told him that the town council was going to talk and then let me know what the next steps are. So he's very well aware. So thank you for this. I'll go back and say, what do you want to do, buddy?
Yeah, pretty much.
We're gonna make him that offer, or and tell him what our appraisal come back, was it
Yeah,
175?
Sorry,
Was it 242?
Have we,
Close to 250, I think,
Yeah.
233, 42 something.
so we're gonna let him?
Well,
No,
I think, Tommy, the proper thing to be is that someone interested in buying the property, okay? We provide them with some information that we got an appraisal, this is what the appraisal is, and it's up to them to make a counter offer. There's going to be a counter offer. If they're motivated to buy the property, they'll make a counter offer. If they're not, I don't think we should try to twist anybody's arm to buy the property.
I don't know that we've even made a decision to sell the property, but,
2/3.
and the negotiation, if it were me doing the negotiation, I would mention a lease, a long-term lease, and they would have the use of the building for whatever period of time, 20 years, 30 years, with some dollar amount, which I don't know what I would recommend. But again, we would retain ownership of the property with the improvements, but they would have the benefit of the use. So that, and it could be, of course, a smaller dollar amount than what it was appraised for, but the building would be improved. We would retain ownership, maybe not in my lifetime, but, you know, I think that's something that Colonial Beach has to start to consider. And I understand that Gary Mitchell is very familiar with this, and at some point, we've been too busy in our meetings, but at some point, I would like to invite him in to, I'm not even sure of the term, but you know, he's well versed on this, long-term leases.
Quickie workshop,
Okay.
quickie workshop, maybe, long-term leases.
On that same note, I was informed this morning that there are 2 applicants to purchase 2 more alleyway vacations, whatever you call them. About, you know what I'm talking, the little strips of land that are waterfront, not considered waterfront, from 2 homeowners in town that want to purchase these right-of-ways or alleyways. Gary has the applications, and he didn't say, will you go to council and ask them, but he implied he wants to know where to go with it. Are we gonna think about selling any more of those alleyways?
I didn't know anything.
Specifically, you
If
need,
somebody requests to buy one, we just passed
We have
a
a
resolution
process
last
in
year.
okay, I'm sorry, I
It
wasn't aware
goes
of
to
that.
the planning commission, Gary gets paperwork together, he goes to the planning commission, they review it, they get staff input, they come up with a recommendation and then forward it to us.
Okay, thank you.
Whether they recommend for or against, it still has to be forwarded to the council if someone comes in and asks to have a piece of land vacated. I mean, we did do the resolution last year that covers the
You
procedure.
did change the process last
Yeah.
year, and
Right.
there is
Go
a
to the
specified
planning.
Okay,
procedure.
could you get me a copy of that, or could
Oh,
Val?
I'm delighted to.
I'm sorry, I didn't have
And I can tell you, I do have some paperwork on that, and I will confess, it's like not on the top of my priority, but it's in there in a pile of stuff.
Okay.
But generally, it's up to him to get together the background, the application, make sure it's filled out properly,
Make sure it
and then it
matches.
goes to the planning commission. for
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
And Mr. Mayor, if I recall, I think it no longer goes to the planning commission.
Correct.
I'm going to look at it.
That was the change. It used to go, and now it doesn't. It's not
It's
required
directed
to
to you.
go to the planning commission.
So
And it was
I-
slowing it down, and it was costing us more money, and people were frustrated.
Because of multiple ads,
Right.
advertising there, and
Yeah.
advertising for the town council, so that was one way to save
Now
some
it comes
dollars.
straight to us. But we do have a procedure in place.
Yes,
Yes,
thank
we
you.
do. And
You're right
I
about
will
that.
Yeah, I'll email.
Did he mention how long he's had these? How long have these people been?
He implied they were recent.
Okay.
They're fair to raise that, everybody only got hard on the pile.
Be implied they
There are those files in your office. Can I get them?
Okay.
No, okay.
Maybe you need to leave them there and we'll just look at them.
Yeah, in this issue of selling town property, we have several things we need to address in the near future. We still have an outstanding offer from someone who wants to buy a lot on the boardwalk. His offer is less than the appraised value of the property. We have the offer from Rudy Lentz and his group to buy the old police station, way significantly less than the appraised value. I will get back with Rudy and his group and share with them what we have talked about and see if they would be interested in proposing a long-term lease, or if they would be interested in, I can guarantee you they're not going to pay $230,000 for it.
So
But
you're saying I
we
should.
might could work out something where they would be responsible for certain upgrades to the building, and we would
Right.
take what the normal lease would be and maybe cut it down by 40% or whatever, work out a formula.
Right.
It says over a 10-year period, the improvements become ours, the building remains ours, but you get 10 years or 5 years, whatever it works out to, in X amount, if you do this work to improve the building. And it would be a win-win for both sides. They would have what they wanted, the town would be getting a better asset in the long run. Right now, you're probably not going to get, if you want to sell any of that stuff down there, because it's such a hodgepodge, we've got town hall sitting right in the middle of all of it. Now, if you could ever, if we ever move town hall out of the historic downtown district, and you could go to a developer then and offer that whole thing, so keep the facade, we'd have certain requirements, but you could buy 3 or 4 buildings there when you look at what the school board's sitting in, town hall, where the chamber's sitting. A lot of stuff that we've got down there right now doesn't have to be right there in the high rent district.
Right.
But because we have never got anybody in there, the buildings are deteriorating. And nobody, very few people want to pay the amount that it would be appraised at to buy one building, whereas a developer might want to buy 3 or 4 buildings there.
Mr. Mayor, where do we stand on the Paul Stefan Foundation lease?
They've been back to talk to us a couple of times.
Yes, I met with Randy, Mr. Curtin was with us, and he said he would get back with us this past week. And I have learned not to push him. I let him work at his own pace. I realized that I was going a little bit faster than he wants to. I think it's on track. He wants to be very careful about his pricing before he puts a written proposal to the town. So he's visited the site maybe 3 times now. He met with the entire staff 2 weeks ago, was it?
About 3 weeks ago.
And asked a lot of questions, and I think the questions were favorable based on what he was looking for, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I mean, I'm very impressed. He impressed me as a very methodical person. He came in and he had a list of, he had a typewritten page, and he asked a question, and everybody gave his answer, and he wrote the question down, the next question, he went from the top of the page to the bottom of the page, and then afterwards, I asked him, I said, well, would you mind showing me, if you got some time, exactly what you're talking about? And we went over there and took a look around the building, and he pointed out, this is what, these are the things I'm gonna have to fix, and he doesn't want to start until he's certain that he's got the money to do it, and that he can get it done in a way that's satisfactory to him, because he is a contractor, and his name's on the line as well. If he's going to do it, he wants to do it right. But he didn't impress me that he had any thoughts of pulling the plug on the project or anything. He's just going about it very carefully, making sure that he gets it done right the first time.
Steve Survey still going to do his work?
Wait, I didn't ask him about that, but one of the things that he had mentioned in earlier meetings was that a lot of the effort that was going to go into this was going to be in-kind type stuff. And one of the things that really helps it when you got community support. I can tell you, I've been in contact with Orange County, and they can't speak highly enough of them. They love them up there. So I don't think we got anything to worry about with regards to that. In fact, one of the assistants to the county administrator said, you let us know if you need a letter from us, a recommendation, and you got it. So I don't think I can worry about with that.
Josh is in Orange County, so we've been talking about it. He met with everybody, he met with Dexter, water sewer people, Gary, we covered everything, and I'm comfortable that he is just being very methodical.
Now, if he comes back with a proposal, we'll have another public hearing or whatever and make a decision at that time.
Town attorney, yes, we'd have to advertise.
Right, before we do dispose of the property, correct?
Right.
I mean, I think there's also zoning issues that would need to be addressed.
Well, before we dispose of, we're not going to dispose of it, it's a long-term lease, is it not?
Right, that's what he's
Okay,
proposing.
that's considered,
It's still
okay,
disposing of it.
okay.
He has no interest in buying it, and it's because of the funding, and he's very candid. I've got enough money to buy it, or I've got enough money to fix it up, but I don't have enough money that I want to commit to the project to do both.
Okay.
And that's why he looked at it and said, I can do this if you're willing to work with me on the lease terms.
The reason I ask is that if you just wander around town and talk to people, there's some very vocal issues on both sides of this.
Oh, yeah.
And you've got, I mean, it's a wonderful foundation, and what they're doing is quite good. But you've got a strong group of people in town that are saying, is that the right place? If we're going to be revitalizing the downtown area, we're looking at developing some of the other buildings right along there. Is there somewhere that would be better suited rather than right there on the waterfront?
Well, I asked him about that. I spoke to that, and because it was in that meeting that that letter was shared with us. And he's like, look, he said, if I get up in there and a year or two down the road, if the developer comes in and says, I want to do something with that block and that building's got to be a part of it, I'm out of here. I mean, he was that candid. In fact, I think those were his exact words, I'm out of here. I'm not going to get in the way. Just, because he's, it's as much about establishing a foothold and showing people what can be done, what the private
Right,
sector
you
can do
get
to
into
address this problem.
It's like putting a new airport somewhere. Everybody says, yeah, we need a new airport, but it needs to be on the other side of town.
Oh, yeah, there's an empty crowd. I mean, you can't ignore that. But he was very candid about that too. He was like, if something comes along and it's to your guys' interest and you want me gone, I'm out of here. I mean, no hard feelings.
What is the term of the lease that we're talking about?
I think that was still very much, that was
He's
still very much subject to
He's trying
question.
to figure out how much he'll have to put in terms of dollars to make the building viable for the intended use or the proposed use before he draws up.
When he first brought this up, he had 2 or 3 proposals, and one of the lease type proposals was that if the lease is for 5 years, at the end of 5, if the town canceled the lease, then we would pay him back for X percentage of the money he put into rehabbing it. If it was 10 years, the percentage would be a lot less. After a certain number of years, we own it outright. We would have to work out all that with him. My concern was that we don't make a decision without involving the public again.
Oh, yeah.
We don't input.
In fact, these issues you guys have brought up and addressed for me the big picture, the lack of it started when we started talking about the shopping center and the potential offer to buy that and how we would go about doing that. And Andrea had sent me some correspondence, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but you're very well versed in these things, and I'm kind of curious as to what you may be able to offer with regards to laying out a structure that we would create an EDA for the purpose of developing a vision, recruiting developers, and getting the rebuilding of that back on track, as well as what they would be put to use for as far as acquiring that property if we decided to do that, so we could get town hall out of this area down here and make it available for development.
I had prepared a draft EDA ordinance, which would create a separate entity to facilitate economic development in the town. And my understanding was that at some point we were going to bring that to the committee,
Right.
the ordinance Did you send that to them?
No, I did not. That's what I'm saying. I started to, but sending it out there in the blind, I thought it might, since you've got a lot of experience dealing with this in 2 other municipalities, you might be able to put it in something that would be more easily understandable.
Most localities have an economic development authority. It's a very helpful tool. I think that as a general operating principle, I think it's a good idea for this town to pursue.
How would we, just more as for the benefit of the 2 council members that are new, since we entertain this, as well as everybody else's, what exactly will be the process? And
The ordinance
right.
would be reviewed by, I guess, the council at a work session, and then you would authorize advertisement, and you would have a public hearing and adopt the ordinance, and then people get appointed to the EDA, and then the EDA is off and running, and it adopts its bylaws and, starts operating.
And the EDA would work independently from the council, like planning and,
They're a separate
They're
legal
separate.
entity.
okay.
And they would be empowered to buy and sell property with whatever monies are appropriated to them for that use. Is that how it would work? Exactly how would that side of it work with regards to acquisition, say, for example, of the shopping center property, if that was to come to fruition? Use that as an example. Where would they get the money from? Would we have to give it to them and then they would decide how to spend it, or just?
They have certain powers that they are afforded, and it's ways that they can ultimately build up a stream of income. That usually takes a while and it's complicated. So initially, all of their funding is going to come from the town council, or from the town. They are not. They are a separate entity, and so once you, give them money, they can do with it what they want.
Right.
And they are empowered to sell town property? Did I hear you say that?
Well, that's my question.
They can own and sell property.
They can own their own property. So they could purchase property, not put it in the town's name, put it under EDA?
Right, they would only be able to buy it in their own name.
Right.
Okay.
That would be the vehicle that, if we were to do something like that, as I understand it, that we would, that's the only way it could happen, because we could not, purchase a retail shopping center or something like that and maintain it as such. Is that correct? Body.
Could I ask for a recess?
Sure.
Thanks.
Mr. Mayor?
Could I ask for a sandwich?